The sky was darkening rapidly over the plains of Sodom, painting clouds in shades of purple and blood red. The heavy air carried an acrid smell of sulfur that stung the eyes and throat. Lot ran through the narrow streets of the city, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls he had called home for so many years. Behind him, his 2 daughters and his wife tried to keep up with his frantic pace, carrying only the bare essentials in small bundles. The angels of the Lord had been clear in their warning. They were to flee without looking back, without hesitation, without question. Their words still echoed in Lot's ears. Flee for your life. Do not look back, or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be consumed. Father, wait! Cried Ada, the eldest daughter, her sandals slapping against the stones of the uneven path. We are leaving everything behind. Nothing matters now but our lives. Lot replied, his voice shaking with fear and urgency. The Lord's judgment is near. You saw what happened at our door tonight. Basemath, the youngest daughter, tripped over a loose stone, nearly falling. Mother, she called, turning back. Mother, you must hurry. Edith, Lot's wife, walked more slowly, her eyes scanning the familiar streets, the houses where they had shared so many moments. Her hands caressed the walls of the buildings as she passed, as if trying to memorize every texture, every crack. Edith, Lot shouted to his wife. Don't stop. The angels were clear. The group passed through the city gates, leaving behind the hustle and bustle of the streets, the smell of bread from the bakeries, the sound of children playing in the squares. The sky was beginning to light up with an unearthly glow, and the ground trembled beneath their feet like an animal about to awaken. Basemate grabbed her older sister's arm. Ada, I'm scared. Keep your eyes on Father. Ada replied, pulling her sister forward. Don't look back. Remember what the angels said. The first boom came like thunder, but there were no storm clouds in the sky. The ground shook even more violently, and an intense flash illuminated the entire plain, turning night into day for a brief moment. Edith slowed her pace even further, her curiosity greater than her fear. The sound of destruction behind them was deafening now, and she could feel the heat rising in her back. Mother, no! Basemate cried, realizing her mother's intention. Please, Mother. But it was too late. Edith turned to gaze one last time at the city she loved so much. The daughters' screams of horror echoed across the plain as their mother was instantly transformed into a pillar of salt, her expression frozen in a moment of wonder and wonder. Lot did not dare turn around at the sound of their screams. His heart knew what had happened, but his mind refused to accept it. He only gripped his daughter's arms tighter, pushing them forward, toward the mountains that loomed in the distance. Don't stop. Keep running, he ordered, his tears mixing with the sweat that ran down his face. Don't look back. Don't look at your mother. Ada sobbed as she ran. Father, what if we go to Zor? It's a small town. Surely the Lord will spare it. Yes. Lot agreed, remembering the permission the angels had given him. Zor. We can reach it before dawn. The sky behind them continued to light up with ever brighter flashes, and the smell of sulfur grew stronger by the moment. The sound of destruction followed them like a hungry animal as they raced across the plain toward the small city of Zor. Stay together, Lot shouted to his daughters. The Lord has promised to spare us. Trust in His word. And so, under a sky that alternated between darkness and supernatural light, Lot and his 2 daughters fled from divine judgment, leaving behind not only their city and their possessions, but also Edith, their wife and mother, who had been turned into a monument of salt, an eternal testament to the price of disobedience and God's selective mercy. The sun was beginning to rise over the horizon when the 3 survivors finally came within sight of the walls of Zor. Exhausted, covered in dust, and with hearts heavy with grief, they carried with them not only the few possessions they had managed to salvage, but also the weight of being the sole survivors of a doomed city, a weight that would follow them for the rest of their lives and shape their future decisions in ways they could not yet imagine. The mountains of Zor loomed imposingly against the now clear sky, their rocky slopes offering shelter to the exhausted fugitives. The morning sun revealed a desolate landscape. The once verdant plain had turned into a desert of ash and salt, with columns of smoke still rising into the sky like incense from a cursed sacrifice. Lot and his daughters, Ada and Basemath, had found refuge in a deep cave, far enough away from the destruction that still echoed in the valley below. The rocky interior offered protection from the biting wind and the curious eyes of the few travelers who still ventured along those paths. "Father," Ada, the eldest, called out as she organized the few belongings they had managed to save. "We must think about what to do now." Lot sat at the entrance to the cave, his gaze lost in the direction where Sodom had once stood. The orange glow of the sunset reminded him of the flames that had consumed his city, his home, his wife. His hands shook slightly as he held a wineskin, one of the few comforts he had brought with him. "What is there to think about?" he replied, his voice thick with bitterness. "Everything we have built, everything we knew, it's all gone." Basemath, the youngest daughter, approached with a loaf of bread and a jug of water. "We still have each other, Father, and the Lord spared us for a reason." "Spared us," Lot murmured, accepting the bread reluctantly. "But at what price?" "Your mother." "Don't speak of her now," Ada interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. "We must think of the living." The silence fell heavily between them, broken only by the distant howl of the wind in the mountains. Basemath busied herself building a small fire while Ada continued to organize her new makeshift home. "I remember the stories Uncle Abraham used to tell," Basemath said after a while, his hands busy with the fire, "about how the Lord always has a purpose, even when we can't see it." Lot looked up at his uncle's name. Abraham. He must be in Hebron now, unaware of our fate. "He interceded for us, Father," Ada recalled. "The angels told us. It was because of his prayer that the Lord sent us word." Night was beginning to fall, bringing with it a biting chill that made the small fire seem all the more precious. Shadows danced across the cave walls, creating shapes that resembled the streets and buildings of their lost city. "We have nothing left," Lot said, his voice breaking. "No house, no flocks, no servants. How will we survive in these mountains?" Ada sat down beside her father, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We have more than we think, Father. We have the knowledge you taught us about trade. We have our youth and strength. And most of all, we have the Lord's promise." "What promise?" Basemath asked, joining them. "The promise made to our great-uncle Abraham," Ada replied, her eyes shining in the firelight. "That from him would come a great nation, and that through his seed all the families of the earth would be blessed." "But that promise is for Abraham's family," Lot protested, taking a long sip of wine. "And aren't we part of that family too?" Ada asked. "Doesn't the blood of Terah run through our veins? Who knows what plan the Lord has for us, even here in this desolate place?" Basemath watched her father with concern, noticing how he drank more frequently as the night wore on. "We need to rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow we can think more carefully about our future." The sisters exchanged worried glances, aware that they were the last survivors of their family. Night was falling quickly over the mountains, bringing with it not only the biting cold but also dark thoughts about the future. "I'll make a bed for you, Father," Basemath said, arranging some blankets at the back of the cave. Lot nodded absently, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside, where the red glow still lit the horizon. The wineskin in his hands was nearly empty now, and his thoughts were increasingly confused. "May the Lord keep us safe this night," Ada murmured, more to herself than to the others, as she watched her father sink deeper and deeper into his grief. Outside the cave, the wind blew ancient stories across the mountains, stories of promise and blessing, of fall and redemption. And somewhere in that wind echoed prophecies yet unspoken, of how from that same sorrow nations would be born, and how, through generations yet unborn, that history would intertwine with the very lineage of the promised Messiah. In the flickering light of a small fire, Ada and Basemath spoke in whispers, while their father slept soundly, lulled by the wine he had consumed during dinner. The smoke danced lazily toward the ceiling of the cave, carrying with it the scent of the herbs the sisters had gathered from the mountainside, mixed with the sweet, pungent smell of the wine Lot had kept with him since his escape. "It's been 3 moons since we came to this cave," Ada murmured, her dark eyes reflecting the flames. "And no sign of life beyond these mountains." Basemath hugged her knees to her chest, trying to protect herself from the cold seeping through the rocky walls. "Maybe we should try to get back to Zor." "No," Ada said, her voice firm but low so as not to wake her father. "You saw how the people looked at us there. They know we are survivors of Sodom. To them, we are cursed. Silence hung heavy between the sisters for a few moments, broken only by the crackling of the fire and Lot's heavy breathing. Outside the cave, the wind howled a melancholy melody. Ada, basemate began hesitantly, have you ever thought about our future? What it will be like when our father... Yes, the eldest sister replied, her fingers fiddling nervously with the hem of her tunic. I think about it every night. There are no men in this entire region. The few travelers who pass by avoid us as if we were lepers. How will we keep our father's line alive? Basemate shivered, and it wasn't just from the cold. There must be another way. Which one? Ada asked, leaning closer to her sister. Think about it, basemate. Our mother is gone. Our entire family has perished. If we don't do something, our line will end here. The blood of Terah, the blood of our great-uncle Abraham, all will be lost. But... Basemate hesitated, casting a pained glance at his sleeping father. What you're suggesting, that would be... It would be the only way, Ada interrupted, her eyes shining with dangerous determination. In the old stories, before the flood, wasn't it like this? And look how our father has sought solace in wine every night. The silence that followed was heavier than any that had come before. Basemate watched the shadows dance on the walls of the cave, while conflicting thoughts fought in his mind. He would never agree, he finally whispered. That's why he can't know, Ada replied, rising to check the wineskins. There is enough wine here for several nights. Wine he brought from Sodom, saved for special occasions. Ada, Basemath exclaimed in a horrified whisper. You can't really be considering. Not just considering, her older sister cut in. I've made up my mind. The question is, will you help me preserve our lineage, or will you let our father's name disappear from the face of the earth? Basemath felt hot tears stream down her cheeks. But he is our father. And that is precisely why we have this responsibility, Ada insisted. Look at him, broken, lost. The wine is his only solace now. We can use it to preserve his lineage, to ensure that his name will not be forgotten. A distant thunder echoed across the mountains, as if the heavens responded to the gravity of this conversation. Lot stirred in his sleep, mumbling incomprehensible words. The wine, Basemath finally murmured, looking at the wineskins with a mixture of fear and resignation. He won't know. It's the only way, Ada repeated, her voice firm but shaky. We'll start tonight. I'll go first, to show him it can be done. Then it will be your turn. And if he finds out? Basemate asked, her face pale in the firelight. He won't find out, Ada assured her, though her own voice betrayed her uncertainty. The wine will make him forget, as it has every night since we got here. The sisters remained silent for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. The fire was beginning to die down, casting ever longer shadows on the cave walls. May the God of Abraham forgive us, Basemate whispered, finally giving in to her sister's plan. He will understand, Ada replied, rising to get more wine. Just as Tamar did, who also did what was necessary to preserve her lineage. And so, on that cold night in the mountains, two sisters prepared to commit an act that would forever change the course of their lives and the history of their people. The wine was already poured, and destiny, like the shadows on the cave wall, began to take shape. The wine flowed freely that night, filling the cave with its sweet, heavy aroma. The flames of the fire cast dancing shadows on the rocky walls, creating a silent spectacle of light and darkness. Lot, consumed by the sadness and loneliness of the past months, accepted each cup that Ada offered him, seeking escape in his numbness. Drink, father, she urged, her soft voice masking the turmoil in her heart. The wine will help us forget our losses. It is the best we brought from Sodom, saved for special moments. Basemath stood apart, near the cave entrance, her eyes flickering between the darkness outside and the scene unfolding before her. Her hands trembled slightly as she fed the fire with small twigs, trying to keep her mind occupied. You are good daughters, Lot murmured, his words already beginning to slur. As good as your mother. Oh, your mother. Don't think about her now, father. Ada interrupted gently, refilling the cup. Think only of the present moment, of the comfort we still have in each other. The wind outside increased in intensity, howling through the cracks in the rock like a chorus of lamentations. Basemath shivered, pulling his cloak tighter around his shoulders. Sometimes, Lot continued, his glassy eyes fixed on the flames, I can still see her, you know, standing there, looking back. Why did she look back? Why couldn't she trust the word of the Lord? Drink some more, Father, Ada whispered, her hand shaking slightly as she poured more wine. Let the wine wash away these memories, at least for tonight. The shadows continued their silent dance on the walls of the cave, mute witnesses to the plan that was unfolding. The air was growing thick with the aroma of wine and the smoke from the fire. Do you remember the feasts at our house? Lot asked, his voice growing distant. The celebrations, the feasts. We had it all, didn't we? And now we have each other, Ada finished, noticing how her father's eyes were beginning to close. And the protection of the Lord. The Lord, Lot murmured, his head lolling forward. Yes, he protected us, saved us, like he saved Noah, like he saved Abraham. Basemath watched from the mouth of the cave, his heart heavy with the guilt of what was about to happen. When his father finally lost consciousness, his older sister approached him with purposeful steps. You don't have to look, Basemath, Ada said, her voice shaking despite her determination. Go outside and watch the night. May the Lord forgive us, Basemath whispered, turning away so as not to witness what would happen next. Her tears mingled with the cold night mist as she walked away from the cave entrance. Outside, the stars shone listlessly in the dark sky, and the crescent moon cast a pale light over the mountains. The wind continued its lament, carrying with it the weight of secrets old and new. Basemath looked up at the sky, remembering the stories her father had told of Abraham, of how he would talk to the Lord under the same stars. Does the Lord understand? She asked the wind. Does he see our hopelessness, our loneliness? Inside the cave, Ada moved silently in the shadows, her heart torn between shame and determination. The words she had exchanged with her sister echoed in her mind. To preserve our lineage, so that our father's name will not be lost. Time seemed to drag as Basemath stood guard outside, counting the stars, trying not to think about what was happening inside the cave. The wind sometimes carried sounds from the distant plain, memories of a life that seemed ever more distant. Finally, Ada appeared at the entrance to the cave, her face pale in the moonlight. It is done, she said simply, her voice barely audible. The sisters held each other in silence, sharing a moment of grief and mutual understanding. There were no words that could express the weight of that night, the significance of what had been done. Tomorrow will be another day, Ada said finally, guiding her sister back into the cave. And soon we will know if the Lord has blessed our decision. Lot continued to sleep soundly, oblivious to what had happened. The fire was nearly extinguished now, leaving only red embers that cast a faint glow over his peaceful face. May he never know, Basemath murmured, arranging the cloak over his sleeping father. May this night be lost in his memory like so many others. And so ended that first night, beneath a starry sky that would forever hold the secret of Lot's daughters, a secret that would change the course of history for their people and for nations yet to come. Morning came with a merciless light, seeping through the cracks of the cave like golden arrows piercing the darkness. Lot lay prostrate on his makeshift bed, his head throbbing with the aftermath of the night before. Fuzzy fragments of memory floated through his dull mind like dry leaves in the wind, refusing to form a coherent picture of past events. The smell of bread baking in the embers of the nearly extinguished fire filled the air. Ada had woken before sunrise, determined to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared the first meal of the day, but her voice remained steady. "Good morning, Father," she said, avoiding looking directly at Lot. "I brought fresh water from the spring. It will help start the day." Lot struggled to his feet, his movements slow and painful. A strange, uneasy feeling hung in the air, something he couldn't quite identify, but it made his heart clench in an inexplicable way. "What happened last night?" he asked, more to himself than to his daughters. "I remember the wine, the stories we told, but then..." Basemath, who was sitting near the cave entrance, visibly tensed. "You drank too much wine, father. That's all." There was something in her voice, a discordant note that disturbed Lot. His eyes, still blurred by sleep and hangover, scanned the cavern, trying to find clues that would explain the uncomfortable feeling growing in his chest. "The wine," he murmured, eyeing the partially empty wineskins. "It was the last we had from Sodom. I've kept it for so long." "We still have plenty," Ada interrupted quickly, placing a bowl of hot porridge in her father's hands. "Eat some, father. You'll need your strength. I thought we'd go down to the valley today, look for more herbs to dry." Lot accepted the bowl, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Fragmented images of the night before danced in his mind. The warmth of the wine, the sound of the wind in the mountains, strange sensations that seemed more like dreams than reality. "I've had strange dreams," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Dreams about your mother, about Sodom, about times gone by." The sisters exchanged quick, tense glances. Ada came over, sitting beside her father with studied ease. "Dreams are like that, father. Especially when we drink too much wine. They mix memories, desires, fears." "Yes, but these were different," Lot insisted, frowning in concentration. "There was something I can't remember." "We need more wine," Basemath declared suddenly, surprising everyone with his assertiveness. The youngest daughter, usually so quiet and reserved, stood up with unusual determination. To help us forget. Isn't that what you always say, father? That wine helps us forget our sorrows." Lot looked at his youngest daughter with a puzzled expression. There was something different about her, something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Or was it? It was hard to be sure, with his mind still clouded by the effects of the wine. "Yes, more wine," he agreed slowly, feeling a sudden intense craving for the drink despite his headache. Perhaps tonight. We'll rest early tonight," Ada said firmly. "Now, let's get ready to go to the valley. The sun is already high, and the best herbs should be gathered before noon." While his daughters moved around the cave, preparing for the journey to the valley, Lot sat, trying to organize his jumbled thoughts. Something had changed, he could feel it. Something fundamental had changed overnight, but the more he tried to remember, the more the memories slipped away like water through his fingers. "May the Lord guide us this day," he murmured, repeating the morning prayer that had become a habit since the escape from Sodom. But today, for some reason he could not understand, the words sounded hollow, as if the very air of the cave rejected them. Outside, the sun continued its relentless ascent into the sky, indifferent to the dramas unfolding inside that mountain cave. And deep within Lot's heart, a seed of unease began to germinate, a sense that something precious and irreparable had been lost during that night of wine and forgetfulness. The next night, the ritual repeated itself like a dark echo of the previous day. The wine flowed again, the shadows danced again on the cave walls, and Lot, in his solitude and despair, drank until he lost consciousness again. This time, however, there was something different in the air, a palpable tension, a dark expectation that weighed on everyone like an invisible shroud. Basemath could feel his heart pounding so hard he feared the others might hear it. His hands shook as he poured more wine for his father, following the example Ada had set the night before. "This wine," Lot murmured, his voice thick now, "reminds me of the vineyards of Sodom. Do you remember them, my daughters? How the vines stretched as far as the eye could see." "Yes, father," Basemath replied softly, refilling his cup. "Drink some more. It will help you remember the happier times." Ada watched from the cave entrance, reversing the roles of the previous night. Her dark eyes reflected the flames of the fire, and her expression was an unreadable mask of suppressed emotion. "Sometimes," Lot continued, his eyes beginning to lose focus, "I can smell the gardens, the scent of the flowers. Your mother loved those gardens." "Don't think about that now, father," Basemate interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. "Concentrate only on the wine, its taste, its aroma." The wind outside picked up its intensity, as if nature itself were protesting what was about to happen. The flames of the fire danced erratically, casting distorted shadows on the rocky walls. "It is necessary," Basemate repeated to herself like a mantra, her words barely audible, "to preserve our lineage." so that our father's name will not be lost." Ada remained silent, her face turned toward the darkness outside. She knew exactly what her younger sister was feeling, the crushing weight of guilt mixed with the iron determination to do what they deemed necessary. Lot began to hum an old melody, a song he had used to lull his daughters to sleep when they were little. His voice, thick with wine, held a deep sadness that broke her heart. "Do you remember this song?" he asked, his words slurring. "Your mother, she sang it to you every night." "Drink some more, father," Basemate whispered, her tears falling silently. "Let the wine wash away the pain of the memories." The night wore on slowly, each moment seeming to stretch into an eternity. The wine continued to flow, and slowly, Lot's eyes closed, his consciousness dissolving into a deep, wine-induced sleep. "It is done," Ada murmured from the cave entrance. "He will not wake until tomorrow." Basemate stood still for a long moment, watching her father's sleeping face. "How did you do it, Ada? How did you find the strength?" "Don't think about that now," her older sister replied, her voice distant. "Do what needs to be done. I will stand guard." The wind howled outside, as if nature itself mourned what was happening inside that mountain cave. Basemate shivered, not just from the cold, but from fear and shame. "May the God of our fathers understand our need," she murmured, beginning to approach her sleeping father. "May he see that we do this not out of malice, but out of desperation." Ada closed her eyes, leaning against the cool wall of the cave. In her mind echoed the stories her father had told her about Abraham, about how God had tested his faith in mysterious ways. Was this a test, too? Or was it the natural consequence of her own choices, of her flight to the mountains? The night seemed frozen in time, each moment dragging with the weight of centuries. The fire crackled softly, as if it too wanted to keep what was happening in that cave a secret. "By the line of our father," Basemath whispered one last time, before committing himself to the act that would change the course of their lives forever. "By the promise made to Abraham." And so, under the gaze of the stars and the lament of the wind, the second act of that family tragedy unfolded, sealing not only the fate of Basemath and his family, but the future of entire nations yet to come. Months had passed since those 2 fateful nights in the mountains. Summer gave way to autumn, and autumn to winter, bringing with it icy winds that howled through the cracks of the cave. The changes in the 2 sisters' bodies became impossible to hide, their bellies growing like silent witnesses to the secrets they carried. Lot, who had reduced his wine consumption in recent months, began to notice the changes in his daughters with growing horror. One particularly cold morning, as he watched Ada prepare breakfast, the realization of what had happened on those misty nights struck him like a thunderbolt. "It can't be," he murmured, his wide eyes fixed on his eldest daughter's bulging belly. It can't be." Ada remained silent, her hands mechanically continuing the work of preparing the meal. Basemate, sitting near the cave entrance, instinctively hugged her belly, as if trying to protect the life growing inside her. "What have we done?" Lot cried, falling to his knees, his trembling hands covering his face. "What did I allow to happen? How could I?" "Father," Ada began, her voice surprisingly steady. "What's done is done. It wasn't your fault." "It wasn't my fault," he cried, lifting his tear-streaked face. "How can you say that? I'm your father. I should have protected you. I should have." "Protected you from what, father?" Ada interrupted, finally meeting his gaze. "From the extinction of our lineage? From the oblivion of our name? We did what was necessary to preserve our family." Basemate sobbed softly in her corner, but her older sister stood firm, facing the storm of emotions unfolding before her. "From me," Ada continued, stroking her visible belly, "will be born Moab, and he will be the father of a great nation. His name and his lineage will continue through him. And from me," Basemath added, finding courage in her sister's strength, "will be born Ben-Ami, father of the Ammonites. 2 nations will arise from our decision, father. 2 nations that will carry your blood through the ages." Lot staggered to the wall of the cave, leaning against it as if his legs could no longer support him. Fragmented memories of those nights began to surface in his mind. The taste of wine, the soft voices of his daughters, sensations he had buried deep in his consciousness. "How could we have fallen so low?" he whispered, more to himself than to his daughters. After we were spared the destruction of Sodom, after we received the Lord's mercy. The Lord's mercy is still with us, Father, Ada said, approaching him cautiously. For you see, where there was only desolation and death, now there is life growing. Where there were only 3 survivors doomed to die in the mountains, now there will be 2 new nations. 2 nations born of sin. Lot cried, his voice breaking. Born of shame and transgression. Born of necessity and survival, Ada corrected gently. Just as Ishmael was born of Sarah's need to have an heir through Hagar. Just as Perez was born of Tamar's need to preserve the line of Judah. The silence that followed was as heavy as the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Lot slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his face a mask of pain and confusion. May the Lord have mercy on our souls, he murmured, looking up at the sky visible through the cave's mouth. May he, in his infinite wisdom, find a purpose even in our shame. He has already found it, Father, Basemath said softly, joining his sister. For through our children, his name will live on. Through them, the promise made to our great-uncle Abraham will continue, even if in ways we could not have foreseen. The wind howled outside, but inside the cave, a strange kind of peace was beginning to settle in. It was a peace born not of acceptance of sin, but of the understanding that even in the deepest darkness, the light of divine providence could find a way. Moab and Ammon, Lot murmured, the words heavy on his tongue. 2 peoples born in the mountains, begotten in shame, but destined to be part of the great tapestry that the Lord weaves through the ages. And so, in that mountain cave, 3 wounded souls faced the consequences of their actions, while new life grew amid the desolation, a testament both to human frailty and to the mysterious way God can weave his purposes through even our greatest mistakes. Years passed, as numerous as the stars that Abraham had once been asked by God himself to count. On the slopes of the mountains that had witnessed both sin and redemption, 2 nations were beginning to flourish. The Moabites, descendants of Moab, son of Ada and Lot, and the Ammonites, born through Ben-Ammi, son of Basemath and Lot. Lot, now an old man with a white beard and weather-beaten eyes, spent his days in constant prayer. The cave that had once held so much shame had become a sanctuary of repentance and reflection. From his favorite spot, a rocky ledge near the entrance, he could watch his grandchildren playing on the verdant slopes. "Grandpa," one of the boys called, running toward him with the enthusiasm of youth. "Tell us Uncle Abraham's story again, the one about the stars and the promise." Lot smiled softly, his eyes drifting for a moment toward the horizon, where the salt sea reflected the afternoon sun. Somewhere beneath those deep waters lay Sodom, and on its banks a pillar of salt still marked the spot where his wife had made her final choice. "Come, children," he said, settling himself more comfortably as the little ones gathered around him. "Let me tell you not only about Abraham, but about how the Lord weaves his plans through the generations." As he spoke, his mind wandered through the years, recalling the nights of shame and despair, but also the moments of grace and forgiveness that followed. His daughters, Ada and Basemath, had become matriarchs of their own clans, their stories gradually becoming legends whispered around the campfires. "The Lord promised Abraham," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "that through his seed all nations would be blessed. And lo, even from our mistakes and our shame, he has woven a thread into the great tapestry of his plan." A gentle breeze blew across the valley, bringing with it the scent of wildflowers and aromatic herbs. Lot's grandchildren listened intently, their young faces reflecting the same mixture of blood that had once caused so much anguish. "One day," he prophesied, his words filled with a certainty that only age and wisdom can bring, "from our lineage will come a woman named Ruth. She will be a Moabite, a descendant of Moab, son of Ada. And through her, our connection to the house of Abraham will be restored in ways we cannot imagine." "How do you know that, Grandpa?" one of the girls asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Because I have learned, my little one, that the ways of the Lord are mysterious, but always just. He can turn our greatest falls into stepping stones to his glory. And just as he turned your grandmother's disobedience into a memorial of salt to warn future generations, he will turn our shame into part of his story of redemption." Lot paused, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The shadows were lengthening across the valley, but they no longer held the terror of those ancient nights. Now they were merely a reminder of the constant cycle of life, of the alternation of light and darkness that marked the journey of every soul. And not only Ruth, he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, as if sharing a sacred secret, but Naamah the Ammonite, a descendant of Ben-Ami, son of Basemath, will also come. She will join the line of David, weaving our blood once more with the people of promise. The last rays of the sun painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, reminiscent of that last night in Sodom, when it all began. But now, instead of destruction, these colors brought the promise of a new dawn. Lord, he prayed aloud, raising his hands toward heaven, in your infinite wisdom, you have made even our mistakes part of your great plan. May the nations that were born of my shame one day know your mercy, even as I have known it. And so, on the mountains above the salt sea, where his wife still stood like a pillar of salt, Lot found peace in his old age. He became a living witness to the transforming power of repentance and divine grace, a patriarch whose story would forever be a testament to God's ability to weave straight lines from crooked threads. Out of the ashes of Sodom and the sins of the cave, two nations emerged, destined to play their parts in the great drama of Israel's history. Through Ruth the Moabitess would come King David, and through him, the Messiah himself. And through Naamah the Ammonite, the royal line would be enriched by marriage to King Solomon's son, proving that the Lord's mercy remains constant, greater than any sin, stronger than any shame. And so ends the story of Lot and his daughters, not as a simple tale of sin and shame, but as an everlasting testament to the redemptive power of God, who can transform even our greatest falls into stepping stones to his glory. So, what did you think of today's story here at Infinite Prayer? Please tell us in the comments which part of this story of fall and redemption in God touched you the most. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss anything, and also remember to hit the like button and share this video with someone you know who needs to hear this story today. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow in our next video.